What's up guys, Sub-Zero here. Welcome to my patch 13.1 tier list. This was a huge patch, took some champions almost completely out of the meta like Talia and Soraka, who are really not seeing much play anymore. Brought some champions back into the meta, so Sett, Misfortune, Viego, champs that really weren't seeing much play last patch, are now quite strong again. And the big thing, aside from those things, is that it changed the tempo a lot of the meta in general. So last patch, there was a lot of rolling on level 6 and level 7 to stabilize. Now it's more rolling on level 7 and level 8 so that you can cap out your board really high, play around the 5 cost units, which have gotten really strong with the buffs that a lot of them received this patch. So without further ado, let's hop into my top 5 comps of the patch. As usual, we go from weakest to strongest, so this is my number 5 comp. It is a Recon Reroll. It's a pretty much untouched comp from last patch. You still usually carry Kai'Sa, but I have some items on Vayne. She is buffed up a little bit, so she's a bit better of a carry, so you can carry Vayne if you hit Vayne items. And then your tank items are going to go on Rammus or Cho'Gath, ideally armor items on Rammus and MR on Cho, but at the end of the day, you really just want to stack whichever one you're closest to 3-starring, and items like Sunfire are really good on Rammus because he gets to actually jump into the middle of the enemy team, whereas Cho'Gath just sits there. This is a comp where you're going to roll a good bit at level 6, so at 3-2 usually to stabilize, ideally hitting like say Rammus 2, Cho 2, Kai'Sa 2, and then the rest of your gold is going to get rolled at level 7 just to 3-star everything. It is a really important point that at level 6 you have 30% odds to see 3 costs, at level 7 you have 35% odds. There's really not that big a difference between rolling at 6 and rolling at 7 in this comp, so if you are afraid, if you don't have a lot of HP, it's very reasonable to roll down a lot at level 6 in this comp, and then wait for your ability to do a level 7, and then you can stabilize. This is the level 6 version of the board. At level 7, best case you would get in like a Fiddlesticks, but obviously that's pretty unlikely to hit. You can always play a Zac, that is probably the most common addition to this board. You can play a Vel'Koz, but the big issue is that you really like playing 4 Recon, and so if you add a Vel'Koz, then you have so much backline and so little frontline. So perhaps if you get like a Recon Spat, then you can say cut Ashe and then play Vel'Koz, and then add like a Zac at level 7. You can also just sort of play multiple copies of Threat, so if you have like a 2-star Rammus and a 2-star Rammus here, then obviously that's really good. Same thing with Cho'Gath, or, you know, if none of those, then Zac is completely fine. If you end up building a Jewel Gauntlet or an IE, something really important is that the main use of 4 Recon in this comp is allowing your Recon's abilities to critically strike. That's really big for Kai'Sa because so much of her damage comes from her ability. If you look at, say, from 2 to 3 Recon, you get plus 55% crit chance. If you go from 3 to 4 Recon, you only get 25% more. So if you ever end up in a situation where you build a Jeweled Gauntlet here, or you build an Infinity Edge here, you can deprioritize keeping in 4 Recon and then put something else in, like the Vel'Koz like I was talking about, or just, you know, any unit really. If you hit like one of these Splashable 5 costs, and Urgot is amazing if you can get it in this comp. So that's something you should definitely keep in mind. Only other thing is that on everything 2-star, this comp stabilizes okay at level 8. So if you ever end up in a situation where you know that you're not going to be able to hit everything 3-star because the board's pretty contested, you can just hit Kai'Sa 2, Vayne 2, Rammus 2, Cho'Gath 2, and then push level 8, add in a Zac, ideally add in an Urgot, and then just play this board and try to coast to a top 4. It's not going to do a really good job of like going first every time, but if you ever end up super contested, then this is one way to play it out. And if you survive long enough, if the lobby's weak enough, then you can potentially still roll at 8 and 3-star your Kai'Sa, your Vayne, your Rammus, and your Cho'Gath once potentially like the other players who are contesting you die. So that's my crash course on a Recon Reroll, our number 5 comp. Let's move on to number 4. This is Talon Reroll. So if you saw my video that I put out right when the patch came out, it was Bebe who was spamming Talon Reroll just every single game. I think this comp is not like super broken on this patch, that's why I have it on number 4, but I think it is one of the better reroll comps if you end up in an opener with a ton of Talons or a ton of Silas's, or you end up with like a Talon Hero augment, then it makes a lot of sense to go for this comp. You primarily roll around Talon and Silas. Camille is another unit that you can 3-star. I think Camille generally is a weaker carry than Talon, but if you end up in a situation where, say, your admin gives you extra AD on your admin units, there's one that gives you like plus 50% AD at start of combat on admins, then you can very easily think about playing a Camille game. If you do, her items tend to look like this. This I would say is Camille best in slot. Other items that you can get in are like Giant Slayer is not too bad, but like really quite often you'd like to go for this. Deathblade is another reasonable item on Camille as well. So if you want to go for Camille 3-star, then you can play that version of the board. But this is sort of like the more standard version of the board, where you just 3-star Talon, Silas, and potentially Camille, but it's not that important, by rolling as much as you can at level 4 and then at level 5. So if you have a lot of Talons and Silas, you can hyper roll at 3-1. The way you play a reroll comp like this is you don't put any gold into leveling, and then at 3-1 you may roll a little bit, maybe 10, 20 gold to try to hit more Talons and Silases, and then you'll slow roll at level 5 once you hit 50 gold for Talon 3, Silas 3, potentially Camille 3 as well. Some really easy additions to this comp are Annie and LeBlanc. Annie, of course, gives you Ox Force. Oops, I just deleted her. And then LeBlanc will give you Spellslinger with Annie, and she'll just be an admin for you. If you're playing the Talon version of the comp, what admins are you really looking for? Well, you're looking for team-wide buffs, right? Because you're probably not playing around Camille carry or LeBlanc carry, so you're looking for admins that say, my team gets this thing, or the really, really nice ones are the on-kill admins. So like, say, an admin that says on-kill, gain some HP, or on-kill, gain some AP or AD. Those are obviously really nice on Talon, because he's going to rack up all the kills and become really, really strong. So those are nice. Things that provide, like, the one that's like healing over time isn't too bad. Things that just provide your entire team stats at the start of the combat aren't bad. Like, shield at start of combat isn't bad for someone like Talon. But yeah, this is generally how you play the comp. If you end up playing the Camille variation, you're still going to play Silas and Talon because 3 Renegade is really, really strong. And you can still play this core. It's really good. But if you're playing the Camille variation, you usually want to get an Hacker later. So you could play like a Zoe, and then you get the Hack Rim, and you can use the Hack Rim to deliver Camille to the backline and have her start one-shotting people. So that's how you would play the Camille version, but this is the more standard Talon version. This is a comp that really loves spatulas because you can make a Renegade emblem, you can make an Ox Force emblem, you can even make an admin emblem. So spatulas are really good when you play this comp, and even like Tome of Traits can be pretty strong because if you get if you get +1 Renegade, then you can play 6 Renegade late game. Also talking about late game, if you only end up hitting Sal, then Tylus is very, very cuttable. If you hit Silas 3, then like I would obviously play around him, but say you're in a situation where you miss on Silas 3 and then you end up hitting Talon really quickly, you just say, okay, I'm going to abandon it. I can get into Viego. Eventually Camille's going to end up coming out for Leona, and you can play just a very standard version of the Ox Force board like this. Start committing even more towards Ox Force, like late game you'll get in like a Phelios, you'll get an Alistar, of course, and then just sort of start building around this core. You could get in a Fiora for 6 Ox Force if you want to. So if you don't care about Silas, then this is a very reasonable version of the comp that you can play. But yeah, I think this is probably the best one-cost reroll comp at the moment. So if you're a reroll player, check it out. Oh yeah, and then Talon itemization. Jewel Gauntlet to make his spell crit is really good. Ionic, because he's going to be jumping to the back line, so zapping them and getting rid of them. MR is really good, and then Hodge is just a damage item that also synergizes with JG because it gives you crit chance. So yeah. All right, let's move on to our number 3 comp. This is 6 Lasercorps Zed. So 6 Lasercorps before this patch was kind of a joke. You basically never went for it because the increase in damage was just not worth the fact that you had to play so many bad units. Like here I'm playing 6 Lasercorps, but Renekton and Senna really aren't doing that much for my board. But they buffed 6 Lasercorps, so now it's actually quite strong, and I think it's really good to play for. One of the easiest comps that you could probably just force every single game is this 6 Lasercorps variation. It's another comp that loves a spatula because all these Lasercorps units are just like not good. So you would love to have +1 Lasercorps so you could cut Renekton and then just play anything else, like play an Urgot and slap the Lasercorps spat on him. He's a very good holder of it because he's the highest based attack speed in the game, so he's going to be proccing this Lasercorps on cooldown, so he's a very good user of it. And then another random unit that I have added here is Fiddlesticks. You're going to see this Urgot plus Fiddlesticks on some late game boards, pretty much every late game board if you can fit them, just because they're the 2 most broken 5 costs in the game. So if you're ever rolling down at 7 and you hit a Fiddlesticks or an Urgot, just pick those up. Unless you're playing a comp that has no open slots, pick those units up and try to fit them into your board. They're so broken. Zoe for Hacker is actually really important on this patch because there are a lot of set front lines running around. So being able to get past that front line, just have Zed ride to the back line and kill Misfortune really quickly is really, really important. And also, ideally, it's kind of interesting to think about here. I can do the full board to make this a bit more obvious, but you really want to be approaching Misfortune from the correct angle here. So like something like this is actually really, really nice to have Zed approach and end up hitting like here and then walking here, or like hitting here. If Zed's autoing here, Misfortune's gonna shoot her ult in a cone like this, and it's going to miss Zed. God, I accidentally put Urgot on that side. What you really want to try to avoid is something like this, where they have their Misfortune here, you have your Hack Room here, and your Hack Room rides. Your Zed rides to be right in front of Misfortune. If he ults, it'll usually be okay, but if there's ever a situation where she starts ulting and Zed just eats the entire ult, like that's actually how you lose this matchup, is Misfortune getting to ult Zed and just one-shot him. The Edge of Night, of course, helps with that, but better to just not take the risk and, ride the Hack Rim like this, where Zed ends up going like here. And then it'll be a lot easier for him to not just end up here and get one shot by the Misfortune. So that's something really important. That's a way that you can definitely lose this matchup. So I often like having Zed up here, and then you can also just easily swap him like here, as long as you don't have something like Knife's Edge, because that complicates things. But yeah, this is just the pretty basic version of the board. The good Lasercorps units are Zed, Yasuo, Sejuani, and Mordekaiser, so you always like to play them, and then Senna if you have to. If you have your +1 Lasercorps, I would play this Renekton here if you don't have the +1 Lasercorps, and I am playing Ashe over Mordekaiser until I hit Mordekaiser just for 6, because it spikes your board so hard. But Spat is really, really good in this comp. If you can hit 2 Spatulas, you can hit the max cap version of the board here, where you get absolutely everything in, you get Mordekaiser in, and then you put your 2 Lasercorps Spats on, say, Fiddlesticks and Zoe, and play 9. 9 is just straight up Exodia this patch. Like, I haven't looked at actually the stats on it. Let's look together, shall we, on what the stats of 9 Lasercorps in, because it's pretty close to auto win the game. 2.34, the highest win rate. It is a 40% win rate when you hit this. So the most broken synergy in the entire game. If you can get to 9 Lasercorps, you should be winning the game most of the time, it would say. It's very unlikely that you bot 4 from this position, and pretty, like 40% chance to win is quite high. So yeah, that's the 6 Lasercorps comp. I think one of the more forcible comps this patch. Oh, and I didn't talk about itemization. So Edge of Night, of course, really important on Zed. Some healing for Zed is really, really nice, because he does heal when he shoots with the Lasercorps drones. That is, I believe, a bug, but I don't think they fixed it yet, so giving him Omnivamp is really nice. And then the last item is Static Shiv. Looks like a weird Zed item, but you really want MR Shred in this comp because of how much damage Lasercorps does. If you look at your damage recap, if you look at what the little damage recap on the Lasercorps synergy says, oftentimes it'll say, Lasercorps dealt 8,000 damage this fight. It dealt 7,000 damage this fight. Being able to shred the enemy's MR is really, really big. So you really want a Static Shiv here. I think Ionic is okay. I actually really prefer the Static Shiv because Ionic is never going to reach backline, right? If you send Zed to backline here, like this Ionic is never hitting Misfortune, which means you're losing out on a lot of the value. If you have a Sejuani 2, it's of course like better, but like especially if you have a Sejuani 1, she can die really quickly. That's also why Mordekaiser is so good in this comp, because he gives you that MR Shred, but you can't afford to just wait until you hit Mordekaiser. You need the MR Shred the entire game. So really prioritize ideally Static Shiv, but Ionic Spark is also very, very good if you can get to it. So yeah, that's 6 Lasercorps. Let's go on to the next comp, which is kind of similar to the comp we saw last time, except instead of Talon Reroll, we are just going Carry Viego. This is the 6 Ox Force variation of it. You always, of course, want 3 Renegade in with Talon and Leona. Basically, the core of this comp is just this. These are the only 4 units you really need to play in this comp. Getting in another Ox Force is nice, but like, this is it. These 4 units. And then you can play whatever you really want around them. So imagine if you're able to go level 8 with a lot of gold, you can easily imagine your board being like a Phelios here, and then those 5 costs that I was talking about, slot in an Urgot, slot in a Fiddlesticks, if I can find him. And then really it's open season. You could play a Janna if you have windy weather, and then give the buff to these units, and it's like really strong. You could just put in like an Aegis unit if you're afraid of getting wrecked by that. So like you can play an Echo. You can even do stuff like if you have a Renegade Spatula and you want a secondary carry, you can play like Zed. And then you have to figure out, okay, like what am I playing with Zed? So you can play something like Echo and Zoe. So you get Hacker in and you get Prankster here. So then you can do like this and Hacker Zed to the backline. So you can play a board like this. And then, like your last slot is pretty flexible. Can be that a Phelios if you want to, or, if you hit a Fiddlesticks. I always play this Fiddlesticks unit. So the really nice thing about this comp is how flexible it is. You really just need this core. Viego items are pretty similar to Talon. Really need the Ionic for MR Shred, you really need the Jewel Gauntlets with spell crits, and then healing is usually quite good on him if you have some kind of healing augment, or even Mecha, or not, I don't know why I said Mecha. Admin is something that you can reasonably fit into this comp, like prior to hitting Leona. If you have this in, and then you play like a random LeBlanc, like I was talking about the core earlier, like this with LeBlanc and Annie. If your admin is something that heals you, then you can potentially forego this item. Eventually, you can get into other things like late game. You might even end up playing like a Soraka if you hit like a Soraka 2. Of course, you lose Spellslinger, but like Soraka 2 is a very strong unit. So you can even do stuff like this. It's a very, very flexible board to play around. I think it's one of the strongest boards on this patch. That's why I have it ranked at number 2. Does pretty decently into the defender boards because Viego can just bypass them and get to backline. It is just a little bit hard for this board to just straight up kill a giant Mecha Sett, so beware of that. But at least he's AP, so he doesn't have to deal with like defenders. But yeah, in my opinion, this is the second strongest comp on the patch. So the first strongest comp, I've been talking about it a bit. Let's look at it. It is 4 Ace Defender with Mecha Sett. This is the most capped version of the board, and it's like everything we talked about in the video so far coming together. We're playing the Urgot and the Fiddlesticks to cap out the board, except I accidentally just deleted Fiddlesticks. We're playing the Urgot and Fiddlesticks just to cap out the board. We are playing this Sett, who is just a raid boss once you give him Mech, and Defender with Wukong. And you can really easily fit in 4 Ace in this comp, as long as you hit the Mordekaiser, because Draven's a mech, so you can stack that for Sett. Then you just play Mordekaiser, Samira, and Misfortune, and boom, you have 4 Ace in. You do need Mordekaiser, so if you haven't yet hit Mordekaiser, usually you just end up playing one of the Aces. So you do something like this. You can play Jax, if I can find him. He's a 3 cost. So you can play just like a core like this, and like if you haven't hit these, like this can literally be the core that you play around, and then you just sort of add units. There's a few things that you can do. If you have +1 defender, then you can think about going like the Riven route. So like putting in a Riven here, giving you 3 defender if you have +1. You can do this. Like you really don't want to play Rel or Poppy. So this is usually only if you have +1 defender, or maybe like a Rel augment. I've seen that as well. If you hit like one of Rel's hero augments, usually the support one, then you can play something like this, and then just start adding more backline. As far as adding backline, I've seen Aurelion Soul played in this comp just as a secondary unit to get the entire team low, and also just to, if you don't have Sunfire, to give healing reduction on the entire enemy team, so you can play around this. You can, of course, once you have these 2 in, add Anima Squad units, so if you like hit a Vayne 2, you could play her. I've seen people play like Nasus. You can do like a combo of Nasus plus Alistar plus Echo, and then you get in Mascot, and then you also get in Aegis, which is really nice. And then late game, this Jax would of course come out, or like a Leona, and then you get to play 3 Aegis. It's just a little bit low damage. This is more if you have like a damage set. So let's talk about Sett itemization. So this is just more like a tank build of Sett with Sunfire, Redemption, and Dragon's Claw. You really want stuff that scales with HP, because Sett's going to eat the HP of these 2 units. So Dragon Claw scales very well with that. Redemption scales very well. And then Sunfire, doesn't really scale, but it just does damage. There are other avenues that you can go. So if you have items that are going to make Sett tanky, Bloodthirster is a really good option. I don't like Bloodthirster as the only item on Sett, but if you can get Bloodthirster plus something else, then you're kind of cooking. So something like a Bloodthirster Titans, and then itemizing, whatever the lobby is. If there's a lot of AD, you could go Bramble Vest, you could go Declaw, you could go Redemption. You can even go like Gargoyles on him. He really carries most items pretty well. You just really don't want flat HP on him that much. Like Warmogs is kind of a no-no. Of course, if you're in a situation where you have to build it, then like fine, put a Warmogs on him. But he's already absorbing this much HP. You really want resists on him. You don't need flat HP as much. Talking about Misfortune items, she has a huge mana pool, 120, so Shojin is really good value on her. And then just damage. Jewel Gauntlet Giant Slayer is BIS on like every champion. If you don't have any healing on your Sett, like if you don't have Bloodthirster, then you can do something like a Hextech Gunblade here, and then heal up your Sett when your Misfortune's ulting to make him last even longer. So that's something that you can do as well. But yeah, these are generally core items. If you don't play Misfortune, you can obviously also just play this core. It would normally be Jax at this phase of the game with Samira. So you can also do something like this, where you can play Samira. Normally, at this phase in the game, you would probably have like a Senna in, and you could play around this core. And then Samira items, she really loves Last Whisper, and like Infinity Edge and like Giant Slayer, like this is a really good Samira setup. And then still, you just fit in whatever you hit. Urgot, always. Fiddlesticks, always. If you can get to the point where you're playing Aphelios, then you get Aphelios in. Then you often want to have Ox Force for him, so usually that's Alistar, so you can play like Alistar. And then you can start adding even more units in, like hopefully eventually Jack comes out for Leona, and then, you know, you start getting into Aegis. You can play like an Echo at that point, and then you get into like a pretty strong variation of the board where you don't have 4 Ace. But I really think the most capped version of this board is the 4 Ace version. It's just, oh my god, it's so gross to just play around this core. If you hit literally one Mordekaiser, I've had situations where I hit this entire board 1-star, and it's just like still winning fights for free because 4 Ace executes at 30% max HP. Actually, the best counter for this comp is the 4 Ace version because you execute Sett when he's at 30% HP, which is so much when it's this giant Sett that's eaten these 2 other units. So if you want to know how to counter this comp, play the exact same comp, but just play 4 Ace version and you can stomp people with it. All right, the video is getting pretty long, so I'm going to cut it off there. Hope you guys did enjoy this video and took something from it. If you did, please interact with the video in some way, like, comment, or subscribe. Also, check out my Twitch down below and all my other links, my Metafy for my coaching, my Discord if you want to stay up to date with all my videos and talk to other people in my community. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and hopefully you have good luck in your games. May you be blessed by Mort Dog. All right, I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.